Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. So, welcome to the fourth class on prophetic wisdom. Today we're going to be covering the topics of humility, the test of wealth, how wealth is a test for us, and the importance of good company. Talking about the importance of good company in Islam. Before we begin, does anyone have any questions about the test or anything with regards to the class so far? Okay. If there's a specific question, just email me regarding it, and we'll look in terms of the way the questions are worded. I know some of them can be worded a little bit difficult or differently. Just go ahead and contact me, and I can double check that specific question. Okay. Anyone else? If we turn in the test late, how many points are going to be deducted? Your attendance will be deducted. So attendance is worth, if I recall, 20% of your grade. So you calculate 20% for that 1 week. So 20% divided by 10 weeks, so it's going to be like 2%. 2% of the class if you turn it in late. So basically your attendance won't count. You'll be docked attendance points for that. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. All right, so humility. Talking about the importance of humility in Islam. The first hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, وَمَا زَادَ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا بِعَفْوٍ إِلَّا عِزًّا وَمَا تَوَاضَعَ أَحَدٌ لِلَّهِ إِلَّا رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ. And that means that Allah will increase a servant in honor through forgiveness. Whoever is humble for Allah's sake, Allah will elevate him. Allah will elevate their status. So what does that mean? Allah will increase a servant. So first of all, what is a servant? Right? Here, whenever the word servant is used, the word abd is being used in a religious context, it's referring to a servant of Allah. And we're all servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Because Allah is our Lord, Allah is our Master, so we're a servant. And there's nothing humiliating about being a servant. In fact, it's an honor. Because when you're a servant in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have freed yourself from being a servant to anyone else besides Allah. So it's a beautiful thing actually to be a servant. This is a sign of respect. Even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was mentioned in the Quran as being a servant of Allah. That was his title, being a servant. Rather than mentioning his name is in fact mentioned very seldom in the Quran, but he's being mentioned as a servant. Even in the places where it's praising him, it's saying servant. So Allah will increase a servant in honor through forgiveness. Now what does that mean, through forgiveness, right? It means that someone forgiving other people. It's not talking about you asking Allah for forgiveness. Meaning that if somebody did a wrong against you, somebody harmed you, someone did something wrong, your ability or your inclination to forgive them is going to do what? It's going to increase you as a servant of Allah in honor. Now this is very interesting because what you find is the mentality is that people, one of the reasons why people don't want to forgive others when they've been wronged is because they feel they're going to be put down. So somebody does something bad to you. Someone harms you. Somebody steals something from you. Somebody insults you. And then it's time to forgive them. And let's say they even come and they ask for your forgiveness. And you say, you know what, if I forgive them, I'm going to be the lower one because they feel like they're the upper one. And actually, this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that no, you're actually going to be elevating yourself in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's take a look a little bit more. It says, Allah will increase a servant in honor. Okay, abdan bi'afwan illa izza. Izza means like honor, your reputation, your standard, your character in the sight of Allah as well as in the sight of other people. Right? Here it's primarily talking about in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So usually when you forgive somebody, it's seen to be like a dishonorable thing, or it's seen to be a weakness. That you've forgiven somebody who's done some harm against you, or some harm to you. But actually this hadith is trying to flip it around and saying, no, actually it's going to increase you in honor. Even if you feel like you're being put down because you're forgiving somebody else, you're actually increasing in honor. How does that work? The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever is humble for Allah's sake, now you have to have the intention, right? You have to be doing it not just for some showing off, not because the cameras are on you or something like that. Whoever is humble for the sake of Allah, Allah will elevate that person, right? So what does being humble actually mean? What is humility? Humility means putting yourself down, right? Thinking that you are low yourself. Being humble meaning putting yourself down. That's the opposite of being arrogant. Being arrogant is putting yourself up, right? Thinking that you're above somebody else. Even whether you do it through a gesture, whether you do it in your own mind, whatever it may be, that's arrogance, putting yourself up. Humility is the exact opposite, putting yourself down. Now the thing is, you need to be humble when you're forgiving somebody and also when you're asking for forgiveness. So forgiveness applies, humility is a requirement of forgiveness when you're forgiving somebody and when someone else or you're going to be asking somebody else for forgiveness. You don't go and you punch somebody and you go and say, you know what, man, I'm really sorry for that. And then you start laughing. It's not a real sign of sincerity, right? Asking them for forgiveness, it doesn't work that way. It has to work in a sense where it's going to be sincere and the person can tell that you're being sincere. The way to do that is to go down and say, you know what, I'm really sorry for what I did. I really apologize. I don't know what I was thinking. My mind was somewhere else. I'm really sorry. If you would please forgive me. Showing a sign of humility in front of somebody else is something that's required in order for it to be sincere and accepted. And it's also needed when you're forgiving somebody else. So if somebody has harmed you and they're asking for forgiveness or whatever it is, and you want to forgive that person, one of the things which might stop you is thinking that other people will think I'm weak. Or thinking that what will other people think? And here we're changing everything around. And the Prophet ﷺ saying, actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to elevate you. So how is He going to elevate you? Elevation is the opposite of humility. Humility is putting yourself down. So when you put yourself down and you forgive somebody else, Allah is actually going to elevate you. Not in arrogance, meaning in status. So that's the way it flips around. You think, see, this is the whole hadith is about, the whole reason why people don't forgive is because they don't want to be put down. And the Prophet ﷺ saying, if you put yourself down in humility, Allah is going to raise your status and elevate your status. So by putting yourself down, you're actually going up. And by putting yourself up, if you were arrogant and you didn't forgive them, you would actually be putting yourself down. Different way of looking at the scenario, right? Different way of looking at the situation. So the general gist of this hadith is that you lower your ego. Get rid of your nafs, your hawa. Get rid of your ego and you're going to be in a better position. You're going to be in a better state. So the thing is, if you lower your ego, right, you're going to raise your real status in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the important thing. That's the important thing, and that's what matters in the end. What difference does it make what reputation you have in society? Right? Hadith is about humility. So when you're humble, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're actually going to be increased in the sight of Allah, even if people in front of you don't think you're cool, or don't think that you did something. What's more important, and what's most important, is to be elevated in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any questions on this hadith? Next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, انظروا إلى من أسفل منكم ولا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم فهو أجدر ألا تزدروا نعمة الله. Look at those who are below you and do not look to those who are above you. It is more likely that you will not undervalue Allah's blessings. So what is that saying? First of all, it's saying look to the people who are below you in status and all of that. Now it says, when it says look, right? Look and focus on those people. Meaning that when you're assessing your situation, your life situation in which you're in, your financial situation, your educational situation, your social, political, emotional, you can even say spiritual situation, any state in which you're trying to assess yourself, and you're trying to figure out, well, where am I relative to that person? What kind of car do I drive relative to that person? What kind of job do I have relative to that person? What kind of spouse do I have? What kind of family do I have? How are my parents? All these things. What kind of masjid do we go to? And how is the other person's masjid? What kind of Muslim community do we have in this part of the world compared to another person's Muslim community? Whenever you're looking and evaluating those things, what should you do? Because people are going to evaluate this on a regular basis, whether in their mind or whether out loud or talking about certain communities or whatever it is. You look to those who are below you, meaning worse off than you. So if it's about economics, and you have if you have a Japanese car, all right, and it's like a $20,000 car, you look to those people who are below you. Those people who have, it's not to like rate cars, but like those people who have a Korean car. Generally, Korean cars are cheaper than Japanese cars. And then you go and you have a Korean car, someone who has a Chinese car. I don't think they've arrived in America yet. When they arrive, they're going to be a lot cheaper, right? So there's a lower standard. So you go and you say, well, you know what, alhamdulillah, at least I have this kind of car. It's more expensive, it's nicer. You look at someone who has a job and you say, you know what, this person has a full-time job. You have a part-time job. Instead of looking at the person who says, see, this person got a full-time job and they're salaried and they have 401k benefits and health benefits and all of these things, I wish I had that. Look at the person who's in the same field as you and they don't have a job. And they've been searching for a job for 6 months and they don't have a job. So when you do that, in every field, in social, in political, every situation, what are you going to get out of it? You're going to get that it's more likely, meaning it's going to help you see that you're in a situation that's really not that bad. And you'll begin to appreciate your situation. You'll begin to realize and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the things that you've been given. So it's more likely that you will not undervalue Allah's blessings that He's given to you. And this is very important because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed all of us with many, many things. But when we lose sight of those blessings because we're focusing on something else or we're wishing we had that other thing, we're going to stop valuing these things. And we're going to say, you know what, I wish I was as strong as that person. Well, you forgot that there are people who can't even walk. You forgot that there are people who can't even sit. And you have all of these blessings. These are blessings. So what is a blessing? All right, it says ni'matullah. Ni'mah is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's given. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distribute blessings? He does not distribute them equally. He distributes them differently in each field. So you will find some people, they're given a higher state of beauty than somebody else. So you should not go and say, well, why did this is not fair. This person got all the beauty and I'm not as beautiful as this other person. Or I'm not as handsome looking as this other person. And I'm not getting as many proposals as that person is getting, for the sake of marriage or whatever it may be. Well, that person may have been given a high level of beauty, but they may have been given a little bit lower level of intelligence, for example. And that's a common stereotype, right? That we have in our thing. Very, very beautiful person, but really, really dumb. If you've seen that, anyways, there was one, Mrs. Someone, one of the states, she won an award or something like that for being beautiful or something. And they started asking her questions about the situation, like where is Iraq or something like that. She started answering like, it's like near Alaska or something really ridiculous, It just shows you that, just because that person has been given a level of beauty, they have not been given everything else. Some people have been given beauty, they have not been given wealth. Some people have been given wealth, they have not been given the same level of beauty. Blessings are distributed differently. Some people have lots of wealth, but they have no happiness. They're not content with anything. They're always displeased with everything. The other person who has little bit wealth, they're content and pleased with that. They're actually richer in their heart than other people are. They're actually more generous and more charitable than other people. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distributes blessings differently. So every single blessing is a great thing that we have, but it's a test as well. And that's what we need to realize. Every blessing is a test, which means that if you got all the blessings, you would have all the tests. And you have not been given all the blessings because your test will be different from the test of somebody else. The test of beauty will be different than the person who has wealth. So if you've been given more wealth, you're being tested with that wealth. Are you going to be a miser? Are you going to be charitable? Are you going to go and help other people? Are you going to hoard that wealth? If you've been given beauty, you're going to be tested with guys coming and trying to hit on you, or girls coming and trying to, get around you or something like that. This is a test. This is a difficult test, especially people who go to college, go to university, even at work, their secretary and all the people who are there. It's a difficult test. You don't want to have really all the tests across the board, even though we think, I wish we had all of it, you know. Inshallah, in Jannah, the difference is in paradise, you get all the blessings and you don't have any tests. That's paradise. Alhamdulillah, inshallah, may Allah make us among the people of paradise. But that's the thing. So blessings are distributed differently in a community for specific wisdoms and reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. What should we do? Our responsibility is to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings that we've been given. And for the ones that we've not been given, to look at people who are worse off than us, continue to, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything we have. And the ones that we've been given, we utilize them in the right way. We fulfill the rights and the responsibilities of those blessings that we've been given, inshallah. And we'll be covering more about that in detail, inshallah. Any questions? Yes, good question. So what about competing for good things, right? And looking at saying, you know what, that organization is up there, we should aim for that as well. So aiming for something that you can accomplish, something that's not inborn or something that you can change, that is when you should look forward. You should look high. You should always aim high. Look at an organization, say, we should strive to become like that, but not complaining. So that's the difference. So you don't want to fall into complaining and saying, I wish we were like that, but we have this pitiful thing and our carpet is like this, and I wish our chandelier was bigger or something like that. Rather than you say, you know what, alhamdulillah, Allah has given us so much, but let's try and improve this area and get to that state even. We need to keep working hard. That's part of our responsibility. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. As long as you're not belittling the blessings of Allah that He's given you. So you don't look down upon the blessings. You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, the next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, Kulu washrabu walbasu wa tasaddaqu fi ghayri israfin wala makhila. So the Prophet ﷺ said, you may eat, drink, dress and spend as long as it is devoid of extravagance and arrogance. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning 4 things that you're allowed to do as long as 2 qualities or characteristics do not mix in with them. So you have a lot of leniency in doing these 4 actions as long as these 2 destructive characteristics cannot mix with them. So what's the first one? Well, it says, eat and drink. I guess we spent it. We skipped it. But basically, eat and drink. You have eating and drinking, right? And you have extravagance and arrogance. Understand what is extravagance and arrogance? When you're eating and drinking, there should be no extravagance. Meaning, don't go above and beyond. There should be no arrogance. Don't do it in such a way or in such a fashion where you're showing off to somebody else. Dressing, same thing. The type of clothes that you wear, the type of clothes that you buy, the type of material you wear and everything, don't allow extravagance to get the best of you, such that you're spending excessively. And don't allow arrogance, don't allow you to walk around and think, well, I wear this brand name or whatever it is. Don't allow that to get there either. And then it even says, and spend. Now spending, the word is tasaddaqu. Spending, tasaddaqu actually means to give in charity. But spending here means in a sense of any type of spending, whether it's spending for charity or spending on something else, don't do it with these 2 things. So this is interesting because the first 3 is kind of pretty obvious, right? People eat and drink and they dress and they get extravagant, they get arrogant, they spend too much money, they show off to other people. That's a common problem. But when it comes to spending, you should even understand that there are limits in charity. Why? Because it's going to come back to bite you. What's going to end up happening is that if you give out too much of your wealth, you give away all of your wealth, for example, then you may go back and say, you know what, I shouldn't have given so much, now my family is suffering, now we're in financial difficulties and everything, and you start complaining. That's why Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he gave away all of his money for the sake of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ accepted that money from Abu Bakr. Another man came at a different time and he tried to give his, oh Messenger of Allah, I'm giving you all of my money. He said, no, I'm not taking your money. You keep some for yourself, you keep some for your family. Why did he accept it from one person and he didn't accept from the other person? Abu Bakr, you mean? Okay, Abu Bakr was, he was not being arrogant or something. But the other man, he was not being arrogant either. He was sincerely trying to give for the sake of Allah. Exactly. He was afraid that this guy doesn't have the same, iman, the same kind of belief and strength as Abu Bakr. He knew that this guy, he's not that strong in the deen. So the guy got really motivated after one speech or something, and all of a sudden, give away everything. And then later on, he's going to be like, oh no, 1 week later, how could I do that? Why did I do that? It's not going to be good for them. That's why there's even limits even in charity. You have to take care of your family. Your family and others have a right over you as well. So there's a level in which you should give. You should be very generous, but you shouldn't be to such a point where it's going to come back and it's going to cause you problems as well. Rarely does it happen, but it happens, so you have to be aware of it. Now let's look at extravagance. What is the definition of extravagance? Right, the word israf. Israf is extravagance, meaning extravagance literally means when you go beyond the limits. Anything you're going beyond the limits in is a sign of extravagance. That's when you've gone too far. Now, where are the limits and where do you set? Limits differ from person to person. The limits are not going to be the same. So if somebody goes and eats, for example, let's talk about eating, drinking, and dress. The way that somebody dresses is going to vary based upon what kind of status they're coming from, what kind of culture they're coming from, how much wealth they have, what kind of profession they have. It's going to make a difference. So if somebody, for example, works at McDonald's, right, on a minimum wage job, and they say, you know what, the only type of cologne that that touches my body is going to be coming from Italy. It has to be Dolce & Gabbana, or it has to be Gucci, or it has to be... You say, this person is not in a status where they can afford that type of thing, right? That's not their status. Now, if somebody else comes and says, well, this person is a surgeon, right? Or they're a businessman, and they own 100 McDonald's, and they're all halal, mashallah, right? And they own 100 McDonald's, and they're very wealthy, and they're spending and they're giving charity and everything. The status and the gatherings that person is going to be going into, the people that they're going to be meeting on a regular basis, the people that are going to be inviting them and everything, they can have maybe a little bit based in saying, well, you know what, this is a really nice, perfume, and it smells really good, and the quality is great and everything. I can go ahead and buy this one because it's not, way out there. This is different. So israf, extravagance, is going to vary from person to person, from culture to culture. And that's something that's important to understand. But don't think that because in American society or in Western society today, everyone's buying all of these things, right? Everyone's buying the smartphone and everyone's buying expensive brand names and everything. But you have to look a little bit deeper. Everyone's buying them. Can everyone afford them? No, they just go and get a loan and they put it on their credit card and they can't even pay the credit card bill. That doesn't mean that everyone's actually affording it. Everyone may have it, that doesn't change the culture. What they could actually afford would be different than what they're actually buying. So understand that there's a difference when it comes to culture. So that's extravagance. So how would you eat with extravagance? And how would you drink with extravagance? Right? When it gets to such an extent, like for example, there are certain people, like when they have a party, they put like there's so much food, right? So much food that the people you invite, it's like 5 times the amount of food that they would even be able to eat, let alone, following the whole 1/3 and all of that. I mean, way beyond that. Who's going to eat all that food? And then the food ends up going to waste, right? So you have extravagance in there, number one. If you were going to give it to somebody else, that would be different. Just to show them, if you presented all this food, and then you say, eat whatever you want, and we're going to make sure that the other food is being utilized. That's not extravagance, because it's being utilized. If it's going to be wasted, and we did it just to show other people, that's extravagance, and it's a sign of arrogance, just to show that you're higher. Or saying, you know what, we only serve caviar, the Russian caviar that's imported from whatever in our place. We wouldn't allow, I don't know, German caviar to come in, or something like that. That's arrogance. So don't allow food and drink or dress. It's common. Dress the way that you dress. Extravagance, things that, are in your level of affordability. You don't have to buy, like everything has to be super name brand or whatever. And the way that you wear it, even people wear, they cut their jeans or they do whatever, but the way that they do it is in such an arrogant way. Like sagging your pants and stuff like that, right? Like letting your pants down and stuff. There's a lot of arrogance involved in that. Like why else would somebody be walking around having to, pick up their pants like every 10 seconds or something like that? It came from prison system, and there's a long reason behind why it came. But part of it is to show, because the lower they are, like the cooler you're supposed to be, right? So somehow, however that works, right? So arrogance in the way that you dress is also going to be prohibited, right? And so what is arrogance? Let's look at arrogance. Arrogance is boasting about some advantage that you have over another person, right? Even if you don't have the advantage, it's even worse. But even if you have this advantage, if you're a little bit stronger than the other person, you get a little bit better grades than the other person, and then you say, see, you know what, I got better grades. Or see, I could, bench press, 200 pounds, and you can't do that. None of you guys can do that, whatever it is. Even if you have the quality, you're not allowed to manifest that, because you're trying to put the other person down, and you're trying to put yourself up. And it's worse when there you have no advantage. So when there's nothing to be arrogant about, and you think, wow, I've done so much for the Muslim community, for example, and you haven't done anything. Everyone's been doing everything else, and you think, well, I helped write this one piece of paper one time, and you think that you're something special. There's no advantage, it's even worse. So what you should be doing is you be thankful for the blessings that you have, rather than boasting over somebody else. Arrogance is to boast. Humility is to not say anything about it and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single thing that you've been given. So the important thing about this hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ is showing the limits. And actually, he's showing you how much flexibility you have in your eating. Eat whatever style of food you want. You want to eat lentils, you want to eat chicken, you want to eat rice, you want to eat fruits. Eat any of that stuff. You want to drink fruit juice, you want to drink vegetable juice. There's so much opportunity for you to do all of these things. So he's saying, do all of this. Eat and drink and enjoy and dress and wear different kind of clothings and all of that. As long as these two qualities do not mix, you're going to be okay. And of course, the other guidelines of halal and haram, of course. But outside of that, don't let these two qualities mix. And other than that, you have a free reign to choose all these different selections and everything. This is blessing from Allah. We don't realize so many things that we have. So alhamdulillah. Any questions on this hadith? Okay. The next one. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharibun aw abiru sabil." The Prophet ﷺ said, live in this world as if you are a stranger or a traveler. So what does that mean? He's giving this advice to his companions. And he's telling them, you should live in this world that we've been created in, as if you are a stranger or as if you're a traveler. Okay? So there's two things. Either this was the specific statement of the Prophet ﷺ, this was his specific statement, or the person who is narrating from the Prophet is saying that he said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib," live in this world as if you're a stranger, or he used the word abiru sabil, or he used the word traveler. The person forgot. So either the Prophet mentioned both, the guy didn't remember, or he mentioned one of the other two, one or the two. So let's assume that he said both. They're very close, but there's a small difference between the two. First of all, what does this world mean? This world meaning kun fi dunya, live in this world, be in this world. What is this world, this dunya? It is temporary, first of all. This world in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us in is temporary. It's like a vacation in a sense. We were created and we were destined to be in Jannah, to be in paradise. And we're just here for a small period of time. Like you go on a vacation, if you go somewhere for 3 years, you're not considered to be on a vacation, you've moved there. If you go somewhere for 3 days, limited time, you're there on a vacation. You're there for just a small amount of time, you're just visiting. So the Prophet ﷺ is trying to explain to us that this world that you're going to be living in is for a temporary period of time anyways. When you zoom out and you look at it in perspective with the next life, which is going to be infinite, it's going to be infinite, then you realize that this life is temporary. And it's like just a destination, you're going to be there for a little while and you're going to be leaving. So how should you behave in this world if you understand and if you remember that your true state here is that you're just here for a little while. You're here for a very limited period of time. It says, be like a gharib, a stranger. So what is a stranger? Now imagine you have a village or you have a town or a city, And someone's there and they're a stranger, right? They're looking around, they're not from this place. They don't belong in the sense that they feel so comfortable all the time, like, this is my home and I'm feeling so comfortable, and there's a difference. So we're from paradise and we want to return back to paradise, inshallah. So you never forget that your real home, your real destination, inshallah, is going to be paradise. It's going to be Jannah. So how do you act here if you're a stranger? If you go to a city and you're a stranger and you're wondering what's going on, you don't behave as if you're at home. In the sense that you don't start getting really comfortable. And you start thinking that, yeah, this is so nice and I'm just going to stay here and I'm going to live my life and everything. A true believer remembers that we have another destination to go to. And that's the same way we should live. When we go, if you travel to one place for a year, let's say you buy a home or something like that. You buy a house over there, still knowing that you're going to be moving out. The way in which you develop relationships, the way in which you invest your money, the way which you establish yourself is going to be very different from if you thought you're going to live there for another 30 years or your entire life. You thought you're settling down. So the thing is, don't settle down in this dunya thinking that you're going to live in it forever. Because people, even though they know that in the back of their mind, yes, of course, we all believe in Jannah and we all believe in the afterlife and akhirah and everything. But in reality, we trick ourselves sometimes because that's the way the nature of this life is. We trick ourselves into thinking we're going to be here permanently. And we start acting as if we're going to be here permanently, and we start setting up everything it's all about this life now. When you make a decision between something that's going to be Allah likes or dislikes, well, the dunya factors into it. Whichever one is going to be a little bit better for our world here, we're going to go ahead and take that one, not realizing that we have another place to go. So he said, be like a stranger. Another example, another one he gave, O abiru sabil, or a traveler. So what is a traveler? You're traveling, it's not your permanent abode, right? So when you go on a vacation, right, do you pack 10 suitcases, 20 suitcases? No, you don't pack every single thing that you have. You don't pile up a bunch of stuff. If you're going on a trip or something, you don't say, well, I'm just going to, buy this car, I'm going to buy this thing, I'm going to buy this, and I'm taking all of it with me. No, because you remember that you're not staying there for a very long time, and you can only travel with so much. So this is a hadith to remind you that your wealth is going to be a test for you as well. That all the things you're piling up, don't pile up so much that's beyond what you actually need. Focus on the things that you need in this life, because you're not going to be here for a long time. Your visit to this dunya is limited. So focus on those resources on something that's going to be better for you. And this is really, really amazing advice. If we remember this advice and we think, even sometimes we just take a moment and you sit by yourself and you think, subhanAllah, how am I living? How am I, attached to so many things around me? Am I living like a real traveler like the Prophet ﷺ told me to do? Or am I living like someone I feel like I'm just going to live forever? This is a major, major problem and illness that afflicts a lot of people. The point is not to sell everything that you own and then just live out of one suitcase. That's not the culture in which we live in. If you were living as a Bedouin or something, you could do that. But the thing is, to at least have an understanding, these things are not going to be getting into my heart. I'm not going to allow these things to pull me down. And whenever there's a priority that I have to do this and this thing is stopping me, this is a dunyawi thing. It's something from this world. I can put that aside for the sake of something good. That's pretty much what this hadith is saying. Any questions on this? That is another hadith, and it's a very good one. But it's a very, very weak hadith. It's very weak. The principle is very good though. And I'm going to explain it just in a minute. So, there's a statement that's attributed to the Prophet ﷺ that says, live in this life as if you're like a traveler, temporary, but invest in it. Right? Invest in it as if you're going to live forever. Meaning grow something. Like if you're going to plant a seed or something's going to happen, the way that you live, as if you're going to live forever, so that you're actually doing the things that you need to do. So the meaning is very correct. Although being from the Prophet ﷺ, there's maqal. There's some statement regarding it. But the important thing is, the same way, that's the principle is very good. So like I said, you don't sell everything, you don't get rid of everything. But when you need to do something, you go ahead and if you knew that your life was going to end in a year or something like that, Would you save up money? Would you plant a tree? Would you go and do something else? Some people get too much caught up into this and then they say, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to focus on prayer. The thing is, we attain paradise by living in this life and by doing lots of other things. So we take all of those things that we're doing, change our intention to make it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and continue to do them. Right? Not to go and live a sheltered life or something like that. Okay? Any other questions? Yeah, the reason why it sounds contradictory is because we're talking about this world and we're talking about the next world. Right? And when you're trying to give guidelines to focus on this and not focus on this, and then you flip it and say focus on this and not focus on this, you have to draw a balance. Right? So there has to be, the Prophet ﷺ is trying to always give balance in things. So whenever you're talking about balance, you will find things which sound contradictory. Why? Because it's your level of perception. The perception, if you're looking at a text, it may seem like, okay, there's a hadith about torturing a cat when we talk about animal rights. If you torture an animal, you're going to be denied paradise. And then it says, but if you say La ilaha illallah, you're going to be guaranteed paradise. The two seem contradictory. The point is that one of them is trying to emphasize one point, and the other one is trying to emphasize another point. So they're not contradictory when you don't look at them as being information, but you look at them as being advice. If you look at them as information, they're contradictory. If you look at them as advice, it's something very different. Like when we talked about if you cross the street, you're going to get hit by a car. It's not it's a statement of fact, but it's actually a statement of warning. So it has to do with the language. So if you understand the language, then it'll be less contradictory. Okay? Inshallah, good observation though. All right, so let's move on, inshallah. The next hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna likulli ummatin fitna, wa fitnatu ummati al-mal." Every community has gone through a specific test, and the test of my community will be through wealth. Okay? So now let's take a look at community. The word that the Prophet ﷺ used was ummah. Ummah refers to any type of community, but specifically, it talks about a religious community. Right? So ummahs of the past, the ummah of Prophet Ibrahim was the followers of Prophet Ibrahim, religious-based identity, although it can refer to any type of specific community. Now the Prophet ﷺ is saying, "Inna likulli ummatin fitna." Every ummah, meaning every religious community or every group of people, has had a specific type of test. The fact that he's using the word ummah implies that people are going to be grouped together, right? Generally, not only in anthropology or sociology or something like that, they're going to be grouped together and studied together even in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people are considered to be an ummah, meaning when they're a community, they share values, the most important values. Right? So what are the most important values for Muslims? Obviously belief in La ilaha illallah, that there's no one worthy of worship besides Allah. That makes an ummah, that makes a community. And that talks, the fact that ummah is being mentioned shows the importance of having a faith-based identity. Meaning your identity, how you identify yourself as a person, first and foremost, or most importantly for you, is that you are a Muslim. You are somebody who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now people can have multiple identities, right? You can be an American, you can be a Chinese, if your parents came from that area, you can be a minority, black or white or brown or whatever. That your color of your skin can be part of your identity, because these things all matter in certain spheres or in certain areas of life. But for a Muslim, in the end of the day, they have to accept that the most important identity that they have is the identity of Islam. And that's how they primarily identify themselves. Whether or not in a public gathering you're identifying yourself with multiple identities, or you're saying this other identity takes precedence or whatever, the real precedence takes place as the fact that you're a Muslim. So the fact that the Prophet ﷺ used the word ummah shows the importance of having a faith-based identity. Because people are confused. Say, which one am I first? Am I Indian or am I a Muslim? And when they have a cultural class with their religion, they're trying to decide. It's my day of my walima, or it's my day of my marriage. Well, because I belong to such and such cultural community, Should I remove my hijab because that's what everyone in my ummah does? Or should I follow the Muslim ummah, and because in Islamic law we're not allowed to do this, even as an exception on this day, I'm not going to remove it. People get into this clash of identities. And we should understand as Muslims that our primary identity is our identity to Islam, because that was what forms the concept of ummah, of community. Now the Prophet ﷺ said, every ummah, every community has had a fitna. Now people have heard this word before, fitna. Fitna basically means a test or a trial. It's not always negative, right? It can be negative if something afflicts you, but it meaning that everyone's going to have a trial or have a test. It's not like something that's really bad happened in your life necessarily. People have a fitna. So sometimes people will use the word like, oh, this person is such a fitna or something like that, right? This is used in a context where it's only negative. But everything and everyone has a fitna or a test that they're going to be getting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a trial. So this trial involves difficulties. It's not a test if there's no difficulty involved. If we gave you all the answers to the test before we tested you, it's not a trial anymore. It's not a test. So there's going to be difficulties. There's going to be temptations. There's going to be a lot of different things sent your way. So how many ways can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala test people? A community as a whole, not just as an individual. He can test them with poverty. He can test them with a drought. He can test them with famine. He can test them with being oppressed by an oppressive ruler. He can test them with so many different things, right? He can test them with. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَفِتْنَةُ ummati. But the main fitna, the main test that my community is going to be faced with is going to be what? Al-mal. It's going to be with wealth. Now he did not specify. Too much wealth, too little wealth. Where's the test exactly? Where is the test going to be? So the thing is, and why wealth? Meaning that we're undergoing as a community today, and in the past we've gone through different tests, gone through oppression, we've gone through injustice, we've gone through different tests people are going through. But he's saying that one of the most important tests, or one of the major tests that my ummah, my community is going to face, is the test of wealth. One of the root causes of all these other problems is going to be wealth. What is the problem with wealth? First of all, when we talk about excess wealth will lead to more and more temptation. So the more and more, when we talk about excess wealth, people have more and more wealth, they become more and more greedy. It just works out this way. It's very interesting. You would think that it become less because their needs have been fulfilled, but it's not. And people will begin to run after it. People will begin to want more and more of it. They'll start competing with one another. And then people who have wealth, they'll start spending it only on themselves and not sharing it. This is a major problem. These are some of the problems that you encounter when it comes to having excessive wealth. The other thing is, this could even apply to a lack of wealth. And if you look at the poverty around the world, many Muslim majority countries are among the poorest countries on the face of the earth. So what we find is that you find Muslims today, they're among the richest and wealthiest people in the world. Billionaires living in castles and palaces and everything, and then you find another part of the ummah being the absolute desolate, dying of starvation. They don't even have anything to eat or drink. Exactly the way the Prophet ﷺ said, one of the biggest tests is going to be wealth. In what sense? It could be high, it could be low. It could be abundance, it could be a lack of wealth. This is a prophecy about the future. Because at that time, the division or the gap between rich and poor, especially in Arabia, was not that huge. It was not the major source of so many of the world's problems. But now if you look at this prophecy, it's really come true. This gap between the rich and the poor has become so extreme. It's something that's probably not been seen in history in the past. And yet we still assume that, we're civilized and everything is nice and everything's going fine. Why? Because we're actually, even if we don't have all the luxuries of the average American or whatever, we're in the top 5% of people who consume resources and have access and availability to resources. And sometimes we don't realize that. So we should realize that, and we should realize that wealth is going to be a very big test and trial for this ummah. And we've already seen it. So we need to make sure that we bring ourselves back to the proper balance, and that is that we're neither the people who are getting, obsessed with too much wealth, nor are we stopping other people from getting some of the charity that we have an obligation to give. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "La al-faqra akhsha alaykum, walakin akhsha alaykum an tubsata alaykum ad-dunya kama busitat ala man kana qablakum. فَتَنَافَسُوهَا كَمَا تَنَافَسُوهَا وَتُهْلِكَكُمْ كَمَا أَهْلَكَتْهُمْ." He said, poverty is not what I fear for you all. Speaking to the ummah. Poverty is not what I fear for you all. Rather, I fear that the world will open up its treasures for you the way it opened up for those before you. You will compete for it the way they competed for it, and it will destroy you the way it destroyed them. So this is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. So what is he saying? لَا الْفَقْرَ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ. The poverty is not what I fear for you. What is poverty? Poverty is lack of wealth. Meaning this is not one of the major concerns that I have for you. It does not negate the previous hadith that poverty cannot be a major test for the ummah. But what he's saying is he's speaking to his companions and he's trying to emphasize one very important point. He's saying, after I die, after I'm gone, what's going to happen to my followers? What is one of the biggest tests that they're going to face? What is something that, what is going to be a difficult scenario for you? When he said this, many of the companions were in a state of poverty. They were in a very difficult state. This was probably said at some point in time where there were wars going on. Muslims did not have that much wealth. They had not taken over the other, Persian Empire, Byzantine Empire, Roman Empire, and all of that. That happened later, after the Prophet ﷺ. So they were not that wealthy. They did not have that much. So probably somebody is thinking in their mind, or a lot of the companions probably had in their mind, one of the things that's going to stop the message of Islam from spreading. One of the most difficult things we're going to face after the Prophet ﷺ passes away is we have to be dedicated to Islam, and we're going to be poor, and we're not going to be able to spread this message. We're not going to be able to practice Islam. We're going to, not have the status, and we're not going to be able to establish, Islam in the land. So the Prophet ﷺ is responding to that, internal thoughts that many of the people had probably at that time, and he's saying, poverty is not what I fear for you. You see, he already knows that they're thinking that poverty is one of the things that's going to hold them back. And he's saying, don't worry, that's the least of my concerns. What you guys are thinking, that's not what I'm concerned. I have no concern. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried that you're going to become poor. لَا الْفَقْرَ أَخْشَى عَلَيْكُمْ وَلَكِنْ Rather, I fear, my real fear, right? Something more dangerous than poverty. My real fear is something that's more dangerous, right? So more dangerous to what? More dangerous to your iman, to your faith, to your belief as true Muslims. So rather, I fear that the world will open up its treasures for you, meaning you're going to get access to a lot of wealth, the way that it opened up for those before you. Meaning, the Prophet ﷺ is talking about previous communities, previous ummahs that existed in the past. They were not all poor. There were previous ummahs that had access to a lot of wealth. They've had access to a lot of wealth in the past. So he's using a lesson from history. And he's trying to explain, you need to learn a lesson from what happened to those people. Importance of showing, this is an important style of teaching as well. There's another teaching characteristic. They use an example of somebody else because they know that certain communities, certain people had faced these challenges in the past. So he says, don't allow yourself to get in the same thing that they were in. What happened to these people? You will compete for it the way they competed for it. So what was their problem? Their problem is they started competing, right? That competition led to fighting for it rather than cooperating with one another. So it became very selfish, very individualistic. Why? Because the problem is with wealth. Intrinsically, part of the problem is with wealth. What is the problem with wealth? Is that it does not multiply, right? Like knowledge, for example. If you know something and you teach it to somebody else, was the knowledge taken away from you and transferred to them? No. But if you have $1,000 and you go and give it to somebody else, now you don't have it and they have it. It doesn't multiply. It just doesn't just, super inflation is not going to happen. You can't just print more money without inflation or without the value going down. So this is the problem with wealth. Only one or only a few people, 1 out of 2 people can possess that specific thing. So what ends up happening, people start competing, people start arguing, people start fighting for more and more and more wealth because they want to have it, because not everyone can have all of it at the same time. And that's just the way resources have been distributed. And then he says, and it will destroy you the way that it destroyed them. So it'll destroy you as Muslims the way that it destroyed them. How did it destroy them and how will it destroy you? One, you're going to lose your focus on all other things in life. The things which are important in life, you'll lose your focus. So you'll stop focusing on why you're here in the first place. You'll stop focusing on the fact that you're here for a limited time. You'll stop remembering that you're a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you'll become a servant of that wealth. You'll stop focusing on your family and spending time with them. You'll stop focusing on the people that you love. All of these things are going to happen to you. So you're going to start fighting and you're going to start harming each other. And you realize that once you get in this state, it didn't even bring you any benefit. All that wealth that you had didn't even do any good for you. So what was the point? What you thought it would give you, it didn't give you. So the Prophet ﷺ is explaining that this is the real test of wealth. Is that one of the things that he's most concerned with is that wealth can cause you to go away from Islam more than poverty could. At least with poverty, you'll be thinking, or you're more inclined to at least remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're more inclined to remember, the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you. You're more inclined to ask Him for help and everything. The more wealthy you become, or the more, you're tested by wealth, the more independent you think you are. And you think that you're in control of everything. You think that you've earned all of this wealth. And this takes you further and further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not necessarily, but it's something that's very common. It's something that's very common among people who have a high level of wealth. And that's why you find people who are wealthier, they tend to be generally not interested in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or interested in Islam, or interested in religion, or interested in being a servant, because they don't feel that they're down here, they feel that they're up here. And that's a problem. Remember, it doesn't mean that it's going to be everyone, but it's a common thing and it's a very difficult test. So any questions on this hadith? The next is the importance of good company. Very, very important to have good company, and this is one of the first steps really. One of the first steps people always ask me, say, we want to come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We want to change our lives. We want to implement Islam in our lives. We're tired of living the same way. One of the most important, they say, what should we do? Should we start praying extra? Should we start fasting more? Should we start giving more money in charity and everything? And I say the first and most important thing is to change your company. Because that's going to determine whether you can maintain all of that motivation. You can maintain all of the things that you're trying to do in the first place. If you're around bad company, they'll just bring you down. So what does the Prophet ﷺ say? مَثَلُ الْجَلِيسِ الصَّالِحِ وَالْجَلِيسِ السَّوْءِ كَمَثَلِ صَاحِبِ الْمِسْكِ وَكِيرِ الْحَدَّادِ لا يعدمك من صاحب المسك إما تشتريه أو تجد ريحه وكير الحداد يحرق بدنك أو ثوبك أو تجد منه ريحا خبيثا. The example of a good companion and a bad companion, he's giving an analogy, like an example. A good companion and a bad companion is that of someone with musk, meaning nice smelling perfume, cologne, something like that, and the bellows of the blacksmith. Now, who can tell me what are the bellows of a blacksmith? What is a bellow? Did you look it up? Yeah. Someone who did not look it up. Does anyone know what a bellow of a blacksmith is? Okay, the one who looked it up. What is it? Exactly. That big thing that you've seen before, you go like this on the fire in order to keep the fire going, to get air on the fire so it keeps going. That's what a bellow of the blacksmith is. At this time, in this society, everyone knew what a bellow of a blacksmith is. Nobody knows what it is anymore. What's a blacksmith, by the way? Blacksmith is someone who works with metal. right? Someone who's hammering the metal, like you've seen probably people making swords in films and stuff like that, and they're hammering it and they're putting it in the fire. So to keep the fire going, you're going to use that little machine that kind of goes like this. It pumps air to keep the fire going, keep the fire strong. So that's the bellows of a blacksmith. I had to look it up myself, so I'm glad. I didn't even know what it was before that either. So that's what a bellows of the blacksmith is. And then he says, you will not be deprived from the person with musk. So now he's giving the example of the good friend. The person who has musk, you're not going to be deprived of getting a benefit from that musk. You either buy it or you smell its scent. So for example, if a friend of yours has musk, you can either buy it from them, or you can at least smell it. Even if you don't want to buy it, you can at least smell it and benefit. Oh, very nice smell, that's great. You didn't even pay anything, but you still benefit anyways. Now, the other example is, while the bellows of the blacksmith, they'll either burn your clothes or you get a foul smell from it. So if you go too close to that, there's a fire always going on. If you blow a little bit too much, the fire might come, it might burn your clothes. In fact, people who work as blacksmiths, there's a lot of danger because you're around fire all the time and you have to get close to it, and you're putting the air, it can burn your clothes. Or if not, it doesn't mean it's going to light your clothes on fire. Meaning it's going to burn like a small part of your clothes that was hanging out or something like that. That's a problem. And he says, even if that doesn't happen, you're going to at least get this foul smell. It's not a place where people will walk in and say, what a nice, the shop of the blacksmith smells so nice. You wouldn't do it. It's like going to a dumpster, right? And saying, wow, what a great smell you've discovered, right? No, it's not going to be like that. Same thing. So he's giving the example of the good friend is like a person who has musk. You can benefit some way. The bad friend is like the person who has working in the blacksmith shop, right? And they can cause a problem for you. So the first thing is, the Prophet ﷺ is giving an example. And this is something which he does on a very common. He's giving an example. He could have just simply said, just think about this. What's the point that he's trying to come across? Have good friends, don't have bad friends. Right? He could have said, you know what, to the companions, I'm going to explain to you. Have good friends and don't have bad friends. And that's it. The message came across. But the message is not being imparted in the sense that you feel like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. And that's a really important lesson for people who are teaching or giving lectures, or you're trying to explain to your children something. And you're trying to tell them, yes, pray like this, don't pray like this. Or do this and don't do this. Yes, you've conveyed the information, but you've not done anything to kind of get them to bring that from their mind into their heart and get them to be interested in it. By giving an example, it illustrates and it emphasizes the meaning to the person who's listening. That's why examples are very, very interesting. In fact, if you study the art of public speaking, one of the things that's very common is they say start with a story or something like that when you're giving a big lecture. So this, I'm talking about like non-Islamic art of public speaking. So you start with like some story or personal story or something. Why? Because it captures people's attention and it kind of helps them to internalize the point that you're about to make. That doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. I mean, if you're teaching a class, I can't start with like a personal story in every class that we have, for example. But it's a good technique and the Prophet ﷺ would use it. Not always, but he would use it quite often. So it's important that we utilize, we understand the wisdom behind using an example. And this is a beautiful example that he uses. So he says the companion, the good companion and the bad companion. What is a companion? The word is jalis. Jalis is someone who like sits with you, someone who you actually keep in your company. A companion basically means that you have a choice in the friends that you're going to be taking. Right? You have a choice in which friends you want to be around. There are some companions who are going to be there that your co-workers. You have no choice to be around them. They work next to you. Right? If you're eating your lunch in the lunchroom and they're going to be around you, you just happen to be there. The people who are in your class who are sitting next to you or something, they're your jalis as well, right? They're your people who are sitting next to you, or they're your companions in a sense. But there's another level of companionship that the people whom you choose to hang out with, or you choose to befriend, or you choose to stay in their company, that's going to determine a lot about the challenges that you face in life. It's going to determine how easy it is for you to be a Muslim or how difficult it is. How easy it is for you to do certain things or how difficult it is. So the Prophet ﷺ is giving an example about a good companion and a bad companion. The good companion that you can have, the good companion that you would like to have, is like someone who has musk. The person smells good, they'll make you smell good as well. Either way, you're going to benefit from the good in some way. That's the important thing. No matter what happens, if that person has good character, good behavior, speaks in a nice manner, you're naturally going to start speaking like the people that you choose to hang around with. Not necessarily one or two, but the people that you try to hang around with. If all of the ones that you like to hang around with, because they're very interesting, or they know a certain topic, or whatever it is, if they're using foul language, even if you say, I'm not going to use this language, I'm a Muslim, I don't speak like that, you will find yourself naturally getting into that language, whether you like it or not. Even if sometimes, you say, I've never used that word or anything, but you've been hearing it the whole time. All of a sudden, somebody cuts you off in the middle of the freeway or something, and you're stressed out one day, you're going to use one of those words that you had heard from them. Because whenever they want to emphasize a point or get stressed out, they use that word. So that word comes out all of a sudden, without you even being conscious of it. So you've been harmed. But if you want to benefit, you have good character around you, you're going to start doing the same thing. So somebody around you is very careful about how they speak, how they look, right? How they do things. You have brothers around you, and those brothers, they like to stare down women who walk by all the time. And they're like, hey, check out that girl, or check out that. They're generally not going to be brothers, but inshallah, they're not brothers. There's people who you hang around with, and they keep telling you, check out that girl, check out that. What you're going to find is, when you're walking by yourself, you're going to see that behavior, even if you didn't want to look, that behavior starts manifesting in yourself, because you hang around with those people. But if you hang around with the exact opposite group of people, and look, it's time to pray, and you forgot completely, and you got 5 guys, right? And they all are very punctual in their prayers. If you forgot, and 4 of them forget, guaranteed one of them is going to remember. You're never going to miss a prayer. Someone's going to remind you. That's the kind of company you want. You want the company when you're walking down the mall and all of a sudden you forgot that, it's time to pray. One of them is going to remember. Some of that, azan program is going to go off in their phone or something. Say, we need to stop and pray. And if you think, we can pray when we get home. If you got 5 guys around you or 5 sisters around you that says, calculating the traffic time to get back home and delaying the Asr prayer, now that we know delaying the Asr prayer is disliked near the end of its time, we should pray right now. Let's just go ahead and make wudu, and we can go ahead and pray in a group over here. You have a group effort, it's going to make a difference. So whether or not you even sometimes see the benefit, by hanging around good people, you're automatically going to get a benefit. Whether you invest something in it or you don't invest. And that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. Even if you don't buy it, even if you don't buy the musk, you're going to still get the benefit from it. You didn't buy anything. You didn't spend any money. It took no effort from you. But you decided, I'm going to put myself in good company. That good company is going to pay off and it's going to help you. You put yourself in bad company, either you're going to get burned or you're going to at least have some kind of foul smell, or you're going to be harmed in some way. So be very, very careful about the friends that you take. Any questions? Yes, very good question. So how do you balance between trying to befriend someone in order to benefit or influence them in a positive way, or explain to them Islam or whatever it is, without you yourself getting harmed? Well, the thing is, you have to make sure that, number one, you have a stronger, what's the right word for it? You have a stronger personality and you have a stronger influence than the other person, right? So that they're not influencing you more negatively than you are influencing them. That's number one. Why is that important? Because what happens that people who have a lot of really strong personality, and when they start practicing Islam, they're taught to be humble, they're taught to be a little bit more quiet, they're taught to be a little bit more reserved. What happens is when they exaggerate in that, then they become kind of too soft, and they try and go make da'wah with somebody else, and they find that they're receiving more bad stuff than they are actually giving something good. That's not the point. The point is, if you're a good Muslim, you should have a strong personality so that it emanates and it kind of spreads, the goodness spreads to everybody else. The second thing is that you need to be confident that this person is actually learning something from you. So rather than them, like if they're coming and saying, well, you know what, I'll tell you what, I'll go and pray with you. If you come and you spend, 1 hour with me at the hookah bar tonight. Okay? Now the thing is, you know that there's a compromise going on, and you say, well, wait a minute, something is wrong here, because I'm trying to, get something good out of them, and they're trying to pull me to something bad. Then you say, well, wait a minute, look, it'll be really nice if you pray. How about we go grab a cup of tea or something like that? So you make sure you're not being influenced, number one. That's another important thing. And you need to know your own limits. You really need to know your own limits and make sure that, you're not being influenced for the negative. And if you see them, like, say, speaking bad language or saying something, say, look, I really enjoy hanging around with you and everything, but you need to watch your language in front of me. This should not be something that's... If they refuse, they say, no, but this is the way I am. And you say, oh, well, if I don't accept them 100% the way they are, then they may not be interested in other things that I have to say. Well, how much progress are you making in the first place, right? So there is a limit, and you should try to befriend those other people in order to be a positive influence. But if you feel that it's kind of crossing the line ever, or you feel that it's doing you more harm than benefit, you have to make a judgment yourself, and you have to say, well, wait a minute, let me make sure, let me either stay away from this person, or let me limit my involvement with this person, and I can go back and I can, spend more time with my good companions who are going to influence me positive. So you're kind of charged up, go and spend a little bit of time with them, and then go back and kind of recharge with your good friends and everything. We have to pray Asr right now, and we'll resume inshallah after the Salat al-Asr.